Welcome to the Bariatric Bros podcast. I'm Mike Alley. I am a foodie and a big guy who had bariatric surgery, lost over 140 pounds. I'm no longer a big guy anymore, but I'm still a foodie. We talk about living that bariatric life and eating like men here. And I want to thank you for being a part and hanging out with me today. I'm excited about what we're going to be talking about today. Every piece of it, every little bit of it. My conversation a little bit later with a guy who has been in the weight loss community for many years and is what you could say is a true advocate for weight loss surgery and everything that goes along with it. Kirk Hunt, going to be talking with him later. So I think you're really going to love it. I really connected with Kirk and was just excited to meet him virtually and have this conversation. And I hope that you'll get a lot out of it. Of course, we've got our Bariatric Bros shout out of the week coming up, and our new feature, our Chaffle of the week, too. That's coming up, too, as it's my new obsession. Hey, we are on social media everywhere at Bariatric Bros. So if you're on Instagram or Facebook, go find us there, follow us, and we'll follow you. We'd love to see what's happening in your world. Of course, we've got our website, which is just bariatricbros.com. You'll find all the podcasts there. We hope that you'll share them out. And if you're listening on whatever podcast provider you're in right now, if you'll follow us or like, share, and also review, we'd appreciate that too. For me this week, I have to tell you kind of a little non-surgical victory, a little NSV for me, and that was I needed to get new jeans this week. Yep, I've got a photo shoot coming up for my full-time job. It's not something that happens very often. We're getting some new headshots kind of, and I've been looking forward to it because, well, one, since my last headshot, I've lost 142 pounds. So that is a great motivator to want to look good and get a new headshot. The other piece, though, is my jeans. You know, when you're in transition and losing weight, this you don't want to go out and spend a whole lot of money. You don't want to go out and drop, a few $100s on clothes because you're going to just be out of them in a little while. And that's been happening. So I've been kind of limping along with one pair of jeans that I had bunched up. I was on the last hole of the belt. I couldn't do much more. They were actually hurting me on the side because they were so bunched up together. So my wife and I went up. There's a great store nearby where I get my jeans. Nothing fancy, but went in there, was down 2 sizes. That felt good, and they feel good being on. As a matter of fact, I posted a picture the other day on the Bariatric Bros Instagram. I was getting dressed. I was putting on this shirt because I was actually going into the office, which we don't do much anymore. But I was putting on this shirt that I love and realized that it was like a tent on me. It was just ballooning out all over me. And so I said, well, maybe I'll tuck it in. I haven't tucked a shirt in years because it's just not what you do as a big guy. You just kind of wear them untucked. And I'm thankful that I was kind of in an industry where I didn't have to worry about that. So I tucked it into these new jeans and I looked in the mirror and I just went, holy mackerel, just look at that. I mean, the shirt tucked in actually kind of looked okay. But I was just blown away, and I'm not the super selfie guy, but I just had to take that mirror shot of how it looked because even for me, it was a moment saying to myself again, this decision to get surgery was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. Not just getting healthy, but just also, honestly, for my self-esteem. Not that I dealt with a lot of problems with it, but to be able to look at myself in the mirror and not kind of just go, okay, whatever, and really kind of look at it and go, wow, yeah, that kind of looks sharp. That looks okay. got to tell you, that was a big thing. So if you want to see that picture again, just go to the Bariatric Bros Instagram and or Facebook, and you'll see that shot of me in my bathroom mirror with a tucked in shirt and my new jeans. So it was really nice. Hey, it's time for our Bariatric Bros shout out of the week, and this week it is Max. All right, Max from his Instagram, Max losing weight. Love it. Max got bypass in 2017. And got to tell you, he's a big gym guy. One of his goals right on his Instagram page is to kind of get that body fat down and build that muscle. And you can tell from his shots, that's what he's doing. And of course, as a foodie, I love Max's food pictures. Max posts a lot of great food shots, and so I'm always checking out his shots to kind of see how he's eating. And I love it too, because you know what, Max being real, he has a picture of there having him a little sweet treat, a little ice cream. And you know what? That is totally cool, because I just had some this weekend too. So Max, the shout out is for you this week. You can go follow Max on Instagram. His handle is going to be in the show notes, and we appreciate it. So if you'd like to nominate somebody for a Bariatric Bro shout out, you can DM us on any of the socials, or you can just shoot us a note. Yep, it's real simple, bariatricbros@gmail.com. Give us their Facebook or Instagram handles so that we know how to look them up and find them and grab a picture so we can promote that as well. But we'd love to shout out maybe someone you know who deserves a Bariatric Bros shout out of the week. And now on to one of my favorite new features. We started it in the last podcast. It is our Chaffle of the week. I should probably get some kind of effect with some echo or something. I mean, I'm a radio guy. I should figure out a way to do that. Anyway, I have been obsessed with Chaffles, the cheese waffles, lots of great protein, low carb, and the little mini dash maker doing them. I just love them. And so last podcast, we introduced our Chaffle of the Week maker. His name is Steve I, the Chaffle Guy, and you can find him at Steve I, the Chaffle Guy on Facebook and Instagram. But he is making us an exclusive chaffle for each podcast episode, and we're putting it up on our Instagram and Facebook pages with the recipes there. You can also find the recipes and links in our show notes. But this week's Chaffle of the Week is a breakfast favorite of mine. It is the Everything Bagel Chaffle. Yes. So how can you get that Everything Bagel taste, but get it in a way that's packing in more protein and a whole lot less carbs than one of those giant bagels? Well, you do it in a chaffle. That's how. So if you want to check out a great picture of the Everything Bagel Chaffle from Steve I, the Chaffle Guy, check out our Instagram or our Facebook page the day this podcast drops, and you'll find the recipes there. And again, the recipes in our show notes as well. So thank you, Steve I, the Chaffle Guy. Can't wait for our next one. Well, as I told you at the start of the podcast this time, that I was really excited about my conversation with Kirk Hunt. And I have to tell you, there are very few people that I've talked to in the bariatric community that have been as active as long as Kirk has. He is coming up on almost 8 years since he had his procedure. He got his procedure at the beginning of 2013. So it has been 7.5 years, I guess, at this point, coming up on 8. And he has been active that entire time in the community. He's the administrator of some of the bariatric support groups on Facebook. He is a speaker at weight loss conventions talking about what this procedure has meant to him and advocating for it to be more available for more people, and also for keeping great mental health. And that seems to be something we've been talking a lot about here on the podcast, about keeping the mental part of this together as you're moving through the process. Our conversation just was so free-flowing and was so packed with great stuff that this is part 1 of my conversation with Kirk, because we went so long and there really wasn't anything that I could say I didn't want you to hear. There's so much good stuff that Kirk and I talk about during this episode, and then we're going to have the second half of it in the next podcast because, like I said, there was just so many great gems. And whether you're pre-op, whether you've just had the procedure, whether you've been like me a couple of years out, or whether you've done it many years out like Kirk, there's just some great gems in our conversation. We started talking about going all the way back. So Kirk was one of the first people that jumped on YouTube to make videos talking about this. And that was even before he had the surgery. He actually did a pre-op video, which you can find. We'll link it in the show notes to his YouTube page so you can find it. I just started out asking him that now, after all this time, if he ever gets tired of talking about weight loss and his surgery.
No, never. And that's why I'm so deeply entrenched in the weight loss community still, when so many other folks that are as far out as I am aren't. So I never get tired of talking about it. And one of the main things, or one of the main reasons why I did the YouTube video to begin with or whatever, was because in my own process back then, or my own research back then, there were no guys posting any videos about weight loss surgery. In fact, back then, it was still pretty much a taboo, even verbal subject. Guys wouldn't talk about weight loss surgery, or they wouldn't talk about it if they've had it, or they wouldn't talk about it if they were even considering it, because it was considered weak or unmanly, or, you're a failure because you couldn't just go to the gym, bro. It was so guys just didn't talk about weight issues or weight loss surgery with each other. So I had very few, if nobody else to relate to when I was going through my process of just trying to figure out what I was going to do and what I wanted to do. So even though it wasn't my thing back then, I said, I'm just going to record this. And even if, when I started my YouTube, I said, even if it's just for me to look back on someday and I just make them all private, then I'll just do that as well. But I really felt like there was a need to have somebody in the male weight loss surgery community being open and willing to talk about it, even if just a total stranger on the other end of YouTube had a chance to see it and see that it was okay to talk about it, and it was okay to, go through with it if that's what they wanted to do.
When you were talking in your very first YouTube video, right before you're having the surgery, you were talking about your way that you were eating, and that you weren't really an emotional eater, but you weren't really a sweets guy. It was all carbs. And I'm just sitting there shaking my head. I'm like, yeah, Kirk and I would get along well, because it was like, that's exactly me. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I don't mind a dessert and a thing, but that wasn't my pig out. My thing was like, if I'm going to have, if 2 slices of this pizza are delicious, then 8 slices of this pizza are going to be amazing. Was that something that was that kind of that same thing that you were dealing with at that point?
Oh, yeah, certainly. I mean, I could eat quite a bit just in one setting. And then I would think what I may have been, if I started to feel full, that just meant it was time to slow down, but not necessarily stop. And then, finally, when I did feel full, that if there was any pizza left over, it still sat out because I was still going to go back to it about an hour later or right before bed.
You mentioned dealing with some depression because of the weight that you had and the things that you couldn't do, which also, let me tell you, man, so connected when you were talking about, going to an amusement park or some kind of adventure thing, and I'm not even getting that line, because I'm not going to be able to get on that ride. I'm not going to be able to do
exactly.
that. I don't want that embarrassment. I hate that. And that was me. I'm a happy guy. I'm a very optimistic guy, and that was fine. But man, that was the last thing I wanted, was to have that kind of embarrassment. Was that depression just linked to those things? Did that change after your surgery, or is that something that you've discovered is still something that you have to deal with?
No, I would say a majority of the depression that I had suffered for decades was definitely directly related to my weight. And it would just manifest itself first thing in the morning. I'd wake up and the very first thing I thought of was how miserable I was going to be in my clothes all day. and how uncomfortable I was going to be in my clothes all day. And then, kind of, but that's how early in the day it would actually start. It would be the first thing I would think about when I'd wake up in the morning. And then throughout the day, I've had several jobs over the years, but the job that I had while considering weight loss surgery was a pretty high pressure, high stress, um, extremely financially lucrative position working in healthcare IT recruitment. And I was, walking into an office every morning in downtown Seattle with people 10, 20, 30 years younger than I am, making six figures, and they're all perfect. And then here I kind of I felt like there should have been some music behind me or something happening as I kind of got off the elevator, and I'm trying to keep my pants pulled up because even though I have a belt on, I'm so loose so squishy and jiggly, my pants could never stay up. And it's just so I would be thinking about it then, and then it would be time to have lunch, and so of course, then again, I was thinking about what should I eat, what shouldn't I eat, what is everybody else eating, being uncomfortable in the chair, then even getting like big and tall chairs to accommodate my size was still, on my mind. If I had to go into the conference room, I was the only person who had to bring my own chair into the conference room because I had gone into the conference room previously and sat on these cheaper, less sturdy chairs with really cheap wheels and had snapped a couple times, so yeah. I just had these constant reminders throughout the entire day of my weight. And then once the day was finally over, it was kind of like a big sigh of relief. And my big reward to myself typically was going to go drive through some place or go get some fast food. And of course I had to have fast food to eat on the way home before I even got home for my like real part of the meal, but I needed something to eat on the way as well.
Yep.
And then my day would end with me feeling guilty and really shitty about myself. So here we go, full cycle, right? The end of my day was going to bed feeling guilty, ashamed, usually in pain, and then just to wake up in the morning already feeling an overwhelming sense of dread and anxiety about facing the world. And once I started my weight loss surgery journey and had the actual surgery, it's never been the same since. I've never, not once, had that feeling post weight loss surgery, because when I went into my weight loss surgery, I think, I was ready. I think I've listened to a few of your podcasts and you've mentioned how, you've tried everything or you've started things and kind of had a reputation, especially with your wife and as well as my significant other, of starting these grand plans to get healthy and lose weight and everything. And then once I had even slightly a little bit of success, I would kind of fall off track pretty significantly. And so for me, when I finally just determined to flip the switch on the weight loss surgery, I really flipped that switch. It just felt right. It was going to kind of strap me a little bit financially, but when I kind of did the math about what I was spending on big and tall clothing, what I was spending on all of these, massive fast food and restaurant runs, what I was starting to spend on more and more medications that I was needing to take. I wasn't one of those people that had a ton of comorbidities with my obesity, but I was slowly starting to creep up to where I was almost starting to need inhalers, and I was having to take more and more different types of psychological medications because my mood and my depression and my anxiety were just off the charts. So when I started doing the math and saying, well, look, if I'm not going to be eating $50 to $60 a day worth of food, and I don't have to spend $100 on an undershirt, and I don't have to spend, $200 a month on medication. When I looked at the surgery, and luckily I was able to finance it back then, the monthly payment for the surgery was far less than everything I was spending to stay obese. So once I made that switch, though, I made a commitment to myself that all of those feelings of shame, all of those feelings of guilt, all of those things about myself that were so black and white in terms of good, bad, happy, sad, whatever, was all going into the recycling bin or the biohazard bin with my stomach during surgery. So I mentally envisioned my guilt, my anxiety, my depression, my shame, my lack of confidence, my everything going into that biohazard bag. the person who was willing to settle for crumbs, you can fill in the blanks, whether that means personal or professionally. That person was going into the biohazard bin. I was never, ever, ever going to be that person again. And having that mindset going into weight loss surgery and just having that mental picture to draw back on rough days or tough days, or when I catch myself saying, oh, I ate something good or I ate something bad, it's like, no, food is not good or bad. Food is just food. I had to really kind of get my head around that and really kind of actively practice that, kind of replacing those terms in my life with things that were a little bit more positive and a little bit more realistic. And also was an extremely effective tool in keeping me from backsliding into bad habits. And my goal really was never going to be a number on a scale. So when people would ask me initially, when I was fresh out of surgery, or when I told people I was having weight loss surgery, like, well, how much do you want to weigh, or what's your goal? And I quite honestly said, you know what? I never discussed a goal with my physician or my surgeon, because for me, it wasn't going to be a number on a scale. That wasn't going to determine my success. My success was going to just be determined in sustained weight loss. And so for me, that was any number, because at the rate I was going, I was gaining weight every single year. I could lose 50 or 60 pounds doing low carb or keto or Atkins, and then gain 100. So I was always losing and going up. And every time I'd go back up, I was always higher and higher and higher. So for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to get the weight loss surgery. I'm going to change my attitude towards food and all those things. And I'm going to use this tool as a physical barrier that requires that I press pause emotionally and physically on my relationship with food. That just really, seemed to work and really kind of kept me in that mindset. So my goal was to sustain any weight loss for a period of 5 years. If I could go into surgery and 5 years later weigh less than I did, even if it was just 5 pounds, for me that was going to be my goal. And luckily, I'm one of the, I don't want to say lucky, because that makes it sound like, there was a roll of the dice and, I just happened to keep my weight off by accident. No, I mean, it's work. It takes work every day. It's hard, obviously, but guess what? On the suckiest, crappiest, hardest day where I feel like I'm working really hard just to kind of stay afloat, I'll take one of my hardest days or my crappiest days now over one of my best days when I was 400 pounds. There's no comparison.
Wow. Yeah. I'm with you 100%. There was not a number on the scale. When I went for my year post-op back in June, and she said, oh, you're right on track. You're 62% of your excess weight. And she goes, how do you feel? I said, I feel great. Because at that point I was down, 135 pounds or something. And I'm great. It was amazing. I couldn't believe I was here. I haven't been here, and right. I can't even tell you when the last time I was this weight. She's like, well, that's great. She goes, do you know where you want to get to? And I said, I'll be totally honest. If I stayed right here for the rest of my life, I'm thrilled because of what I've been able to do and walk and move and wake up with no pain and all of those great benefits. But what do you think I could lose? Like, you're the expert. What do you think?
Your professional opinion, yeah.
Right. And she gave me a number. She was like, I wouldn't be surprised if, at your 2-year mark, you could bottom out another 40 or 50 pounds, which honestly kind of blows my mind, because even being where I am now is amazing to me, much less being another 40 or 50 pounds down. I'm not stressing if that number, isn't, oh my gosh, I didn't drop a pound this week, or I went up half a pound this week. I'm not freaking out about that. Right. I'm looking at it as feel like 100% blessed to be right here. I want to stay on track and keep moving and doing the things that I'm doing. That's me now. You, at 7 years down, you mentioned it being tough. How difficult has it been beyond the whatever honeymoon period of the first couple of years to keep on track? I mean, are you tracking, are you like a hardcore, I'm tracking every day my food or whatever, or you just kind of know what you can do now and how your body reacts to what you're eating?
Yeah. So I'm not a hardcore tracker. I'm not a hardcore numbers person. I'm not a hardcore stats or macros or any of that stuff, the minute anything starts to get kind of difficult or hard in terms of just existing, in terms of eating or whatever, that's instantly makes me no longer interested in any of it. For me, the simpler it is, the more compliant I will be. So, and what I mean by that is when people ask me, oh, so what do you eat on an average day? Or, do you track your food? Or are you doing like keto or Atkins? Or do you low carb? Or do you, what's the other one that's fun or popular now?
Paleo?
Intermittent fasting.
Oh, intermittent fasting, yeah.
Fasting. Yeah, that's popular. All of those things are like, absolutely not. My personal kind of the way I make my decisions when it comes to food boils down to 3 steps. Protein first, and then produce. If there's room for something else after I've gotten my fill on those 2 things, then I'll have some, something that's a little carby or not. When I was in the losing stage, I really tried to avoid anything that was carby, just because that could be a slippery slope for somebody who loves carbs like me.
Right.
But I found by just sticking to protein and produce, by the time I got done with the protein and produce, there really wasn't even any room or any desire for any of the carbs. And I had access to them. I mean, I do all the cooking for us here at home, and my partner doesn't have any type of dietary restrictions. If anything, he's the complete opposite. So, but I stuck to it because, that's what I wanted. And then after a while, it didn't take very long. After a while, those are actually the foods that I would crave. Those were the things like, that my body or what I actually loved. The minute I started cutting out like all the fast food and processed food and pre-made food, just kind of cooking for myself with the whole, concept of just protein first, produce next, my palate changed, and I learned how to appreciate fresher food, more wholesome food, less salty food, because I was controlling pretty much everything that went in. Now, that doesn't mean I don't get into the whole Frankenstein, or I call it Frankenfood stuff, where, I'm going to make, a pizza crust out of this, rando xanthan gum and, coconut powder. Like those aren't, that's just not my jam at all.
Yeah.
If I'm going to have a piece of if I crave pizza, I'll have a piece of pizza. The great thing about the sleeve is, a majority of the time, one piece of the pizza, and I'm beyond full, and then I don't feel so hot. And then I kind of learned the next time I'm probably just going to eat the toppings, not out of deprivation, but just as I started eating cleaner and more wholesome and fresh food, that's actually what I preferred, not just from a health standpoint, but just from a taste and total experience kind of thing.
Yeah, and I don't mind, like, if somebody's got an option for, if I'm at a joint and they've got a cauliflower crust, I'm like, great. Mm-hmm. If it's easy and you can make it, great. I'm fine with that. I'm good. Yes. I don't mind it. But yes, I'm not performing. I love that you call it Frankenstein. I'm not performing serious, chemical surgery here to create, a pizza crust at home or something like that.
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah.
I do cook. I'm the same. I cook. I will, and I don't follow any predefined plan. And as I like to say on here, I understand some people, they need to track everything. They need all the numbers and they need to go that way. And it's like, you got to do you and what works for you. I will say one of the benefits of being on Atkins and all those things I've been on over those years was I learned something from every one of them. So,
exactly. Yeah.
I have such a great knowledge already of, okay, that's that much protein already. That's that much that I kind of in my head can kind of go, yeah, I'm doing what I need to do, through my day. And like you said, that also includes, hey, we're somewhere, or we're at a party for somebody and they ordered pizza. Okay, I'm gonna have a slice of pizza. It's fine. It's not crashing my world. I'm gonna make sure that I've got my protein, for the day and do what I need to do. And I was hardcore tracking at the beginning because to make sure I didn't know what 90 or 100 grams of protein looked like because I'd never
exactly.
focused on getting that in my body at that, at that point. So I really did it until I was like, okay, this is what it is. This is what it takes. This is how much I need to do.
I was going to say that I'm all for tracking, especially for people in their first year to 18 months for sure. Because you're right. We think we kind of know in our heads like what it all adds up to, but then sometimes people are really shocked by how little they're eating, or sometimes like they think they're not eating very much. And then once you start tracking it, it's like, oh, whoa. So I think tracking actually is awesome for people, especially folks that are in their losing stage of weight loss. So there's definitely a different set of rules, that I think that are helpful for folks depending on their various stages.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to give anybody the impression that I'm anti-scale, anti-numbers, anti any of those things. Those are all kind of helpful tools, especially when you're in the in the process of losing. Where I start to caution people, especially in all of the various groups, is that once though that tracking kind of overtakes your happiness, once that starts overtaking your ability to find joy and happiness in things that don't involve numbers and scales and micros and macros, that's when it can be problematic. And that's when people kind of then slide into the all or nothing thing, that if they can't be perfect with all of these things, then they're just going to be a failure, and find a way to eat around their weight loss surgery.
Mm-hmm.
So that they can realize their biggest fear for most people going into weight loss surgery is, am I going to be the only person this doesn't work for? Am I going to do this and then gain all my weight back, like my Aunt Cindy or Sally from the office, or whoever. But yeah, the minute that the scale determines your mood for the rest of the day, that's when you still have some internal work that you need to work on. Because what's going to eventually happen to folks, and this is why I tell people, I'm like, I'm not criticizing you for stepping on the scale every day, or even for some newbies, every hour, every bowel movement, every shower, every sip of water. Right. I'm not bagging people or criticizing people for that. But what happens is, let's say you are successful. Let's say you did everything perfect and you hit that goal weight, and now, holy crap, not only did you hit your goal, but now you're even like 20 or 30 or 40 pounds under your goal. What's going to happen, though, when that scale stops moving? What's going to be your motivation then at that point? If all of your motivation, and whether you determined your success or your failure or your happiness or your sadness or your good day or your bad day, was all defined by stepping on the scale, and you needed that motivation of that scale going down to keep you on track, because you love seeing that number go down, 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 down. You loved posting, the picture of your toes on the scale going down, down, down. But what happens when you're successful and that scale isn't moving? I try to tell people, or I try to encourage folks, that in the beginning of the journey, while you are doing all of these things, also be cognizant of identifying non-scale victories. Be cognizant of identifying things that motivate you that aren't related to a number on a scale. So find those things. Hey, you got on an airplane and you didn't have to ask for an extender in front of everyone, and the flight attendant had to walk down saying, "Here's your extender, Mr. Hunt." Will it work? Does it
You
fit?
do love those flight attendants, though, that do that kind of underhand and bring it and just kind of drop it in your lap, and you go, "Thank you very much."
Well, I'm not going to lie. I mean, I'm a pretty honest person and believe in karma, and I was raised, fundamental Baptist, whatever. So I was born with a lot of fire, hell, damnation. You don't steal, you don't do these things. I will never forget the day where the only thing I've ever stolen in my entire life was a seatbelt extender on a flight, because I was flying a lot at the time anyways.
Just so you could have it?
Just so I never had to ask for another one.
I love that.
Because sometimes they didn't even have enough of them on the plane, right? Because as Americans, we're getting larger and larger and larger, where they actually had to delay a flight so they could get another extender, or have another extender ran to the plane so that I could fasten my seatbelt.
I had to wait one time while they did the safety thing, because that's the only extra one they had, was the safety thing. And when they got done the safety thing, then she walked it over to me, and I was like, "Thank you." And
find those things like getting on an airplane and not having everybody look at you and divert their eyes. They're with you know what they're thinking. Oh, please God,
No.
don't let this guy be sitting next to me. Oh God, please don't let this guy be sitting next to me.
Yep.
So find your rewards, your non-scale victories, in things like riding planes or going to amusement parks with your friends and family, or waking up in the morning and not even knowing that everything in your closet is going to fit and or might even be too loose. I mean, those are the types of non-scale victories where you catch yourself in a reflection, maybe in a mirror, and you don't even, or in a reflection in a window as you're walking by a storefront, and you don't even realize it's you, or you see your shadow even, and your shadow even looks smaller, and you're like, wait a minute, that can't be me, or the fact that you go take pictures with your friends and family now, and you don't strategically place yourself behind everyone or in front of the rock or the sign or whatever, or or if when you're sitting, you're making sure that your shirt isn't tucked into one of your creases or one of your rolls. I mean, the fact that you can just take pictures and not even have to think about your position. If anything, now I'm in the front of the picture, front and center, and most of the time I'm as naked as I can possibly be. So it's a complete opposite thing. So I'm like, find your non-scale victories, not on a scale or not in the number of calories that you ate in a day or the number of grams of fat you consumed, or if you went over a little bit in your whatever. It's like you need to find ways of keeping yourself motivated when the scale stops to move.
I took myself just for a day down to the beach and sat on the beach shirtless for the first time in forever. Now, look, it ain't pretty with the loose skin happening, and all of that. But it was just, you know what? I'm doing this for me. And I'm going to sit out here and soak up. And, of course, I burned my chest crazy. But, it was still something I wanted to do, for me. And I just said, I'm getting over this. I'm not toned up and buff or anything like that. But I just went, you know what?
Either as most people. 90% of the U.S. are not also toned and buff. Those are our own limits and our own rules that we place on ourselves. And look, you did it. Did you die? No. Did a circle of people come around you and start laughing at you and pointing at you and taking videos of you? No. I mean, there's so much that we thought was happening in our minds. I mean, some of it did. Don't get me wrong. There were obviously times and places where where people wouldn't help you in a grocery or in a clothing store, or where you were being dissed for being your size or whatever. But for the most part, a lot of that dialogue or a lot of those things are just going on in our own heads. And once you've done it a few times and you realize, hey, I didn't die, I actually enjoyed it, and you'll go a little bit farther each time. And those are the types of things that you have to acknowledge and appreciate as a non-scale victory.
What did I tell you? That was an amazing conversation, and that's just part one with Kirk Hunt. I want to thank Kirk for his time, spending some time with me talking about these important issues and the things that face all of us as guys going through this process. He's just so knowledgeable, so much wisdom, no matter where you are in the process. And on the next podcast, we'll have the rest of my conversation with Kirk. So you're going to want to follow and like and save this on whatever podcast provider you listen to, because next time the conversation gets even deeper and we even get into some more real life stuff that guys are going through in this process. So that's going to be it for this time. Hey, I want to thank you for spending some time with me today. You know what? What you can do to help is to follow or like or maybe even review if your podcast does that, if your podcast provider does that. So like if you're on Apple Podcast, if you're listening, would you give us a quick review? I sure would appreciate it. It helps other people find the show. It really does. If you're on Stitcher or Spotify, just go ahead and hit the like button or the follow button so that you can be notified the next time that our episode drops, and you will have it right there ready to listen to. And don't forget to check us out. We're on all the socials at Bariatric Bros. You can send us an email, bariatricbros@gmail.com. You can even text us. Our phone number's right in the show notes. We would love to hear from you in the upcoming weeks. I'm Mike Alley. Thank you for being part of the Bariatric Bros podcast this week. You keep living that bariatric life and eating like men.